The night cracked open like a seed beneath frost. A sharp wind combed the hill, tugging at the thatch of the cottage roof and worrying the bare branches of the apple trees, but inside, the hearth glowed with a patient, honeyed warmth. Sparks lifted and vanished up the chimney as if the fire itself were whispering prayers to the dark. Lara paused with her hands dusted in flour and ash, listening, not just with her ears but with the deeper listening she had learned long ago. The year was turning. You could feel it in the bones if you were quiet enough. "Sora," she called softly, though the girl was only a room away. "It's time." Sora appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the word time itself, her dark hair braided with twine, and the first brave snowdrops she'd uncovered near the stone wall. She was nearly grown now, old enough that the cottage seemed to shift when she moved through it, making space for who she was becoming. But tonight her eyes were wide with the same bright solemnity she'd worn since she was small. "Is it really starting?" Sora asked, breath misting faintly in the cooler air near the door. Lara smiled, a smile worn smooth by years of winters and the promise that always followed them. "Imbolc never starts," she said. "It arrives, like dawn, like milk rising in a pot when you're not watching." Sora grinned at that and stepped inside, pulling the door closed behind her with care, as though the night itself might spill in if she were careless. The cottage wrapped around them, low beams darkened by smoke, shelves crowded with jars of dried herbs and beeswax candles, a wooden table scarred by decades of use and love. Everywhere, signs of preparation lay waiting. A bowl of fresh cream cooling by the window, white ribbons coiled like sleeping snakes, bundles of rosemary and bay tied with red thread. Outside, winter still ruled. Snow lay in stubborn drifts along the hedgerow, and the moon hung thin and sharp as a sickle. But inside the cottage, something gentler was stirring. Lara wiped her hands on her apron and crossed to the table. "We'll begin with the candles," she said, her voice lowering into the cadence that meant this was no longer just talk but teaching. "White first, always white." Sora nodded and reached for the beeswax tapers she had helped pour weeks ago, their surfaces faintly marked by her fingerprints. As she set them into the waiting holders, she glanced up at her mother. "Grandmother used to say the candles could hear us. Is that true?" Lara considered this, the way she always did, as if weighing the truth on an invisible scale. "I think," she said at last, "that they hear us the way soil hears footsteps, not with ears, with memory." They worked in companionable quiet for a time, the small sounds of preparation, ceramic clicking against wood, the whisper of fabric, the steady breath of the fire, braiding together into something almost like music. Lara moved with practiced grace, her long skirts swaying as she laid out the ritual cloth, white linen embroidered with symbols older than either of them. Sora mirrored her movements, sometimes clumsy, sometimes startlingly precise, learning not just the motions but the pauses between them. Imbolc had always been Sora's favorite, not for its spectacle. There were no roaring bonfires or wild dances tonight, but for its tenderness. This was a threshold festival, her mother said, a time of quiet bravery, the promise that life would return even if the world still looked asleep. "Come here," Lara said gently, holding up a small bowl of water drawn from the well before dawn. "Do you remember why we bless it?" Sora stepped closer, the firelight gilding her cheeks. "Because water remembers winter," she said, then hesitated, "and forgives it." Lara's eyes softened. "Yes," she said, "and because we do too." She dipped her fingers into the bowl and traced a sigil in the air, murmuring words that felt older than language. Sora watched, feeling the familiar hush settle over her chest, the sense that the world had leaned in just a little to listen. When it was Sora's turn, her hands trembled. Lara did not correct her. She never did, not right away. Instead, she placed her own hands over her daughter's, steady and warm, guiding without gripping. Imbolc is about beginnings, Lara whispered near Sora's ear. But beginnings are shy things, they need kindness. The words sank deep, settling somewhere beneath Sora's ribs. She breathed out slowly and the tremble eased. As the candles were lit one by one, their flames small but defiant, the cottage seemed to expand, making room for memory and hope alike. Shadows danced along the walls, and for a moment Sora thought she saw other figures there, women with familiar eyes, hands raised in blessing. But when she blinked, there was only the light. "Mother," she said quietly, as Lara poured the cream into a shallow dish, "do you think the land knows us yet? I mean me." Lara paused. This was not a question to answer lightly. "I think," she said, choosing each word as carefully as she chose herbs, "that the land knows your footsteps. It knows where you sit to think and where you cry when you don't want to be heard. Tonight, it will learn your name." Sora swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. Outside, the wind softened as if in agreement. They carried the offerings to the door, opening it just enough to let the night peer in. Cold air brushed their faces, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and distant pine. Lara set the dish down on the threshold, murmuring thanks to the unseen, to the ewes heavy with lamb, to the seeds sleeping under frost. As Sora knelt beside her, the moon slipped free of a cloud, silvering the path beyond the cottage and the quiet fields beyond. For the first time, Sora felt it, not just the idea of spring, but its pulse, faint but insistent like a heartbeat under ice. And somewhere deep in the dark, something answered. Lara felt it too. She straightened slowly, her expression unreadable, and reached for Sora's hand, gripping it just a little tighter than before. "Stay close," she said, though her voice was calm. "Imbolc always opens doors, some of them we expect." The candles flickered behind them. The night held its breath. And the ritual was only just beginning. Lara closed the door with care, as if sealing a promise rather than shutting out the cold. The latch settled into place with a soft wooden click, and the cottage exhaled around them. The fire hummed lower now, no longer crackling so loudly, its light turned inward and thoughtful. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lara squeezed Sora's hand once and released it. "Now," she said, turning back toward the table, "we listen." Sora knew what that meant. Listening was not passive, not the way children listened at lessons or villagers listened to gossip. This kind of listening required the whole body, the soles of the feet, the hollow behind the breastbone, the place at the base of the throat where truth sometimes lodged before it could find words. They sat together on the woven rug before the hearth, knees nearly touching. Lara reached for the basket beside her chair and drew out 2 pieces of fresh bread, still warm from the oven, their crusts pale and soft. She broke one in half and handed it to Sora. "For Bridget," Sora murmured, setting her piece on the small altar stone near the fire. "For ourselves," Lara replied, taking a bite of her own. The bread tasted faintly of milk and rosemary, comfort baked into every crumb. She chewed slowly, deliberately, as if honoring the act itself. Outside, something shifted. It was subtle, no sound exactly, more a change in the quality of silence. Sora felt her shoulders prickle, the way they did when a storm was gathering miles away. She glanced at her mother, but Lara only nodded once, her gaze unfocused, fixed somewhere beyond the visible world. "Do you remember," Lara said quietly, "your first Imbolc?" Sora smiled despite the tension coiling gently in her chest. "You wrapped me in every blanket we owned," she said. "I could barely move." "And you still wriggled out of them," Lara said, amused. "You crawled straight toward the door, determined as anything. I wanted to see the candles outside, Sora said. I thought the stars would come closer if I stood in the snow. Lara's smile softened into something edged with longing. You cried when the cold touched you, but you didn't ask to go back inside. Sora tilted her head. You didn't make me. No, Lara said, because some lessons don't belong to warmth. The fire popped softly, releasing a spark that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The cottage creaked, a familiar settling sound, like an old woman adjusting her shawl. Sora traced the pattern of the rug with her fingers, following the spirals and knots woven by hands long gone. Mother, she said after a while, what did you ask for at your first Imbolc? Lara inhaled slowly. The answer came with the weight of memory. I asked to stay, she said. In this place, in this life, I had been offered other paths. Sora looked up sharply. Offered. Lara nodded, eyes still on the fire. There are always offers when the year turns, especially for those who can hear them. I was young. I wanted to run toward the brightest thing. And you did. I listened, Lara said, and I chose the quiet flame instead. The words settled between them, heavy and warm as a quilt. The candles on the table flickered again, their flames leaning briefly toward the door. Sora's breath caught. Mother, she whispered, there. I know, Lara said calmly. She rose to her feet and crossed the room, her movements unhurried. From the shelf above the hearth she took down a small bell, its surface dulled with age, etched with crescent moons and tiny stars. She rang it once. The sound was clear and bright, slicing cleanly through the air. The flickering stopped. Whatever had been pressing at the edges of the cottage withdrew, or perhaps simply waited. The sense of being watched softened into something more like being acknowledged. Sora let out the breath she'd been holding. That was close. Lara set the bell back in its place. Not close, she said, curious. Sora frowned slightly. What's the difference? Lara returned to her seat, smoothing her skirts. Curiosity listens, hunger takes. They sat with that for a while. The night stretched on, patient as stone. Outside, an owl called, low and questioning. Come, Lara said at last, standing again. There's one more thing before the dreaming. Sora followed her to the small washstand near the window. Lara lifted the pitcher of warmed water and poured it slowly into the basin. Steam rose, carrying the faint scent of lavender. This is new, Sora said. Lara smiled. Traditions grow, she said, just like daughters. She gestured for Sora to sit. With gentle hands, Lara unbraided her daughter's hair, strand by careful strand, fingers moving with the same attentiveness she brought to spellwork. Sora closed her eyes, the familiar intimacy loosening something deep inside her. When I was your age, Lara said softly, my mother washed my hair on Imbolc. She said it helped the year recognize me. Sora laughed quietly. Did it work? Lara tipped the water slowly over Sora's hair, warm against her scalp. I'm still here, she said, so I suppose it did. The water pooled in the basin, catching candlelight, turning it into liquid gold. Lara murmured a blessing, not loud, not formal, but threaded with love and intention. Sora felt it settle over her like a second skin. As Lara dried her hair with a linen cloth, Sora felt suddenly very tired. Not the heavy exhaustion of labor, but the deep, pleasant weariness that came after being truly seen. Mother, she murmured, eyes still closed, will I always stay? Lara stilled. For tonight, she said carefully, yes. Sora opened her eyes, meeting her mother's gaze in the reflection of the darkened window. There was no fear there, only honesty. Tonight is enough, Sora said. Lara smiled, relief flickering briefly across her face. It usually is. They prepared their beds near the hearth, laying out quilts stitched with symbols of protection and growth. Lara banked the fire low, leaving just enough flame to keep the cold at bay. The candles were snuffed one by one, save for a single light left burning on the altar. As Sora settled beneath her blankets, the world felt closer somehow, as if the walls of the cottage had leaned in to shelter them. She listened to the familiar sounds of night, the sigh of the wind, the soft crackle of embers, her mother's steady breathing nearby. Just as sleep began to claim her, Sora felt it again, that pulse beneath the earth, stronger now, more insistent. Lara felt it too. She opened her eyes in the dim light, staring at the ceiling beams, her hand tightening slightly on the edge of her quilt. Outside, beneath the snow, something old and patient stirred. And Imbolc, gentle as it was not finished speaking yet. Sleep did not arrive all at once. It drifted in like mist, touching the edges of thought before daring to settle. Sora lay on her side, facing the hearth, watching the last flame curl and uncurl as if practicing being small. Each breath she took seemed to pull her deeper, not down, but inward, toward a place that felt both ancient and new. Her dreams began softly. She was walking through the orchard, though she knew without looking that it was not quite the orchard as it existed now. The trees were younger, their branches less knotted, their bark smooth beneath her palm. Snow lingered in pale ribbons along the ground, but between it, green pushed through, tender shoots, impossibly brave. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, already smiling. Lara stood there, but not as she had that evening. She was younger too, hair loose down her back, eyes bright with an unguarded hope Sora had only glimpsed in fragments before. She wore no apron, no ritual cloth, only a simple white dress that stirred in a wind Sora could not feel. "You're dreaming," Lara said, though her voice carried no surprise. "So are you," Sora replied. Lara laughed, the sound clear as water poured over stone. "Yes," she said, "I suppose I am." They walked together between the trees, their steps soundless on the half-frozen earth. Overhead, the sky glowed with a pearl-gray light, neither night nor morning. Somewhere nearby, water moved beneath ice. "This place," Sora said slowly, "it feels like a remembering," Lara finished, "not just yours." Sora stopped walking. "Why now?" Lara turned to her, expression gentle but intent. "Because Imbolc loosens things," she said. "Roots, promises, old doors." Before Sora could ask more, the dream shifted. She was very small again, bundled in blankets, the world a blur of warmth and scent. Milk and smoke, wool and lavender. She heard voices, women's voices, layered like harmonies. One voice stood out, low and steady, speaking her name with reverence. "Sora." The sound of it echoed, carrying more than meaning, carrying lineage. She felt hands smoothing her hair, tracing symbols she could not yet understand but somehow already knew. She felt herself being welcomed, not into the cottage, not into the family, but into the turning of the year itself. When she woke, the fire was nearly out. For a moment she did not know where she was. The cottage seemed unfamiliar in the gray pre-dawn light, its shape softened, its edges blurred. Then she heard her mother breathe, slow and even, and the world settled back into place. Sora sat up quietly, pulling her quilt around her shoulders. The candle on the altar still burned, its flame small but unwavering. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale, the night loosening its hold. She felt different, not changed exactly, more like something had aligned. Carefully she rose and crossed to the window. Frost etched delicate patterns along the glass, but through them she could see the faint outline of the hills, the orchard beyond. As she watched, a bird darted from one branch to another, quick, alive. Behind her, Lara stirred. "You felt it too," Lara said softly, not opening her eyes. Sora turned. "I dreamed," she said, "of you and of more." Lara sat up, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. The lines of sleep lingered on her face, but her eyes were sharp, luminous. "Dreams are generous on Imbolc," she said. "They give what waking minds cannot carry yet." Sora hesitated. "There were voices," she said. "Women, I think they knew me." Lara's hand tightened on the edge of her shawl just briefly. "They do," she said. "They always have." The words were not heavy, but they carried weight nonetheless. Lara stood and moved to the hearth, coaxing the embers back to life with practiced ease. As the fire brightened, color returned to the room, warmth blooming outward like a held breath released. "Come," Lara said, "before the sun crests the hill." They dressed quickly, layering wool and linen, tying scarves against the cold. Lara pressed a small bundle into Sora's hands, white cloth wrapped around something firm and cool. "What is it?" Sora asked. "An offering," Lara said, "and a question." They stepped outside together. The cold bit sharper than the night before, but it was a clean cold edged with promise. The snow glittered faintly, already softening in places where the earth had begun its quiet work. The sky blushed pale rose at the horizon, the first hint of dawn. They walked past the orchard, past the stone wall, to the old well where the land dipped slightly, forming a hollow protected from the worst of the wind. This place, too, felt older than memory. The ground here had been pressed by generations of feet. Lara knelt, motioning for Sora to do the same. "Imbolc belongs to thresholds," Lara said. "Night to day, winter to spring, child to," she stopped herself, smiling faintly. "Well, we'll let the land finish that sentence." Sora swallowed, fingers tightening around the bundle. Together they unwrapped it. Inside lay a small, carved figure made of pale wood, a woman holding a flame close to her heart. The carving was simple, worn smooth by touch. "Grandmother," Sora breathed. "And her mother before her," Lara said. "It's time you carried it." Sora looked up, startled. Are you sure?" Lara met her gaze, steady and sure. "I am." The sun edged higher, light spilling into the hollow. The carved figure seemed to glow in Sora's hands, warmth seeping into her palms. The land held its breath. And somewhere deep beneath the frost, the question waited to be answered. Sora did not answer right away. The weight of the small wooden figure felt greater than its size suggested, as though it carried not just history, but expectation. The pale wood was warm now, warming further as dawn crept across the hollow, and Sora had the strange sensation that it was warming back, responding to her touch. The land exhaled. Not as wind, not as sound, but as a loosening. The tight, winter-held stillness eased just a fraction. Somewhere beneath the snow, water shifted its course. A root stretched. A seed listened. Lara watched her daughter with a stillness that was anything but passive. This was the hardest part of any rite, she knew, the part where guidance must step aside and allow choice to breathe. "Questions don't need words," Lara said quietly, "but they do need honesty." Sora nodded, throat tight. She knelt fully now, pressing her knees into the cold earth, and held the figure between both hands, close to her chest the way the carved woman did with her flame. She closed her eyes. At first there was only sensation, the chills seeping through wool, the distant call of a crow greeting the morning, her own breath fogging the air. Then slowly something else layered itself beneath those things. A hum, not audible but unmistakable, like standing too close to a beehive, like blood moving through veins. She thought of the orchard, of the first snowdrops she had uncovered with numb fingers days ago, her heart lifting ridiculously at the sight of their green insistence. She thought of the cottage, of candlelight and bread and her mother's hand steadying her own. She thought of leaving, of paths she had imagined late at night, places beyond the hills, faces she had never seen. And she thought of staying. Not staying as in never leaving, but staying as in belonging. The hum deepened. Sora felt rather than heard the presence of others, not crowding, not demanding, just witnessing. Women whose names had been spoken over hearths and wells, whose lives had been braided into the land until the two were indistinguishable. She did not feel judged. She felt known. "I don't know everything yet," she whispered, voice trembling but true. "But I want to learn. I want to tend what's been given. I want to listen before I change things." The words sank into the soil. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then warmth spread outward from her hands, not hot, not burning, but alive. The carved figure seemed to pulse once, gently like a living heart. Sora gasped, eyes flying open. The snow closest to her knees darkened, melting into the earth beneath. Lara inhaled sharply, not in fear but in awe. "That's enough," she said softly, reaching out at last to rest her hand over Sora's. "You've been heard." The warmth faded, settling into something quieter, steadier. The hollow returned to its winter hush, though it no longer felt empty. Dawn had fully broken now, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Sora's hands were shaking. Lara helped her to her feet, pulling her into a firm embrace. Sora clung to her, breathing in the familiar scent of smoke and herbs and home. "I didn't mean to," Sora began. "You did exactly what you were meant to," Lara said, voice thick. "You spoke from the root." They stood there for a long moment, mother and daughter framed by morning light, until Sora's trembling eased and the cold began to bite again. "Come," Lara said at last, smiling through damp lashes. "Let's bring the day inside before it gets any ideas." Back in the cottage, the fire welcomed them eagerly, flames leaping higher as if fed by more than kindling. Lara set water on to heat, and soon the space filled with the comforting sounds of morning. The clink of cups, the scrape of a knife against bread, the gentle sigh of settling wood. Sora placed the carved figure on the altar, beside the candle that still burned. In daylight, the carving looked simpler, humbler, but Sora knew now that appearances were only one layer of truth. As they ate, Lara watched Sora over the rim of her cup, memorizing her in this moment. There was something subtly altered about her daughter's bearing, a quiet confidence settling into her bones. Not certainty, readiness. "You'll be tired today," Lara said. "Imbolc work always asks for payment." Sora smiled, wrapping her hands around her mug. "That's all right. I think I know how to rest better now." Lara returned the smile, pride blooming warm and fierce in her chest. After breakfast, they opened the shutters fully, letting the pale winter sun spill across the floor. Dust motes danced like tiny spirits, careless and bright. Sora swept while Lara tended the herbs, trimming away what winter had taken and whispering thanks for what remained. As the morning wore on, a knock came at the door. They both froze. The knock came again, gentle, uncertain. Lara met Sora's gaze. There was no alarm there, only curiosity edged with caution. "Imbolc opens doors," she murmured. Sora nodded, heart quickening, not with fear, but with that same humming awareness she had felt in the hollow. Lara crossed the room and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, along with the scent of snow and wool, and a figure stood on the threshold, half shadowed by the pale light. A traveler by the look of them, cloak dusted with frost, eyes bright with questions they hadn't yet asked. Behind Sora, the altar candle flickered. The year, it seemed, had more to say. The traveler hesitated, one boot still poised on the packed snow, as though uncertain whether crossing the threshold would change something irrevocably. In truth, it already had. Lara did not step aside immediately. She never did. Hospitality to her was not the absence of boundaries but their careful opening. She took in the figure before her with a calm, practiced eye, the way the cloak had been mended more than once, the way the traveler's shoulders were held not defensively but wearily, the faint shimmer of cold clinging to them like a second skin. "Yes," Lara said, her voice neither sharp nor soft but steady as a well rope. The traveler swallowed. Up close, Sora could see that they were younger than she had first thought, though travel had written its own lines into their face. Their hair was wind-tangled, their cheeks flushed from cold. "I'm sorry," they said, then cleared their throat. "I was told there was a cottage on this hill, that someone here might help." Lara glanced back over her shoulder, just briefly at Sora. Sora felt it again, the hum, low and patient, vibrating just beneath her awareness. She had not moved, but something inside her leaned forward. "Come in," Lara said at last, stepping aside. "Winter doesn't need another victory today." Relief washed over the traveler's face. They ducked inside, pulling the door closed behind them with a care that did not go unnoticed. As the latch settled, warmth claimed them quickly, color returning to their fingers. "Thank you," they said, eyes flicking around the cottage with open wonder. "I didn't realize how cold I was until just now." "That's often how it goes," Lara replied. She took the traveler's cloak and hung it near the hearth, where steam rose faintly from the melting frost. "Sit, warm yourself." Sora moved automatically, setting another cup on the table, pouring tea with hands that felt steadier than she expected. She slid the mug toward the traveler, their fingers brushing briefly as it changed hands. The hum stirred. "Thank you," the traveler said again, quieter this time. They took a careful sip, eyes closing briefly as warmth spread through them. "I didn't mean to intrude on a holy day." Lara's brow lifted slightly. "You know it's Imbolc." The traveler nodded. "I felt it," they said simply. Then, as if realizing how that sounded, they flushed. "I mean, people talk about turning points." Sora caught her mother's eye, a spark of shared understanding passing between them. "What brings you here?" Lara asked. The traveler hesitated, fingers tightening around the mug. "I'm not entirely sure," they admitted. "I've been walking for days. I thought I was heading somewhere specific, but every time I tried to decide, I ended up closer to this hill." "Paths have their own opinions," Lara said mildly. The traveler laughed, surprised, and some of the tension eased from their shoulders. "So I've learned." They glanced at Sora then, really looked at her, and something unreadable crossed their face. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity sharpened by instinct. They began, then stopped. "I'm sorry, that's rude." Sora smiled, feeling oddly calm. "You can say it," she said. The traveler exhaled. "You're standing at something," they said slowly. "I don't know how else to put it." Lara set another log on the fire, the flames flaring bright. "She always has been," she said. Sora felt warmth bloom in her chest, equal parts embarrassment and pride. The traveler nodded, as if that confirmed something they had suspected. "I thought so." They drank the rest of their tea, then set the mug down carefully. "My name is Elen," they said, "and I think I've been carrying a question for a very long time." The words hung in the air, familiar in their shape. Lara inclined her head. Imbolc is a good day for questions, she said. Less so for answers, but we can offer shelter while you listen. Elend's shoulders sagged with gratitude. That would be more than enough. Outside, the sun climbed higher, light spilling fully into the room now, illuminating the altar, the carved figure, the single steadfast candle. Sora followed Elend's gaze as it lingered there, and felt the hum respond, gentle, curious, awake. The cottage, it seemed, had opened itself wider. And the day, like the season, was only beginning to unfold. Elend stayed. Not at first in any formal way. There were no declarations, no careful negotiations of time or intent, but in the way people sometimes remain where they are meant to be, moment by moment, until the idea of leaving begins to feel abstract. Lara did not ask how long they planned to rest, and Elend did not offer an answer. The kettle was refilled. Another log was added to the fire. The day accepted this new shape without protest. As the sun climbed, the cottage grew brighter, gentler. Frost melted from the window panes in slow, wandering paths, revealing the hills beyond, their slopes softened by snow and light. Somewhere in the orchard, a branch shed its burden with a quiet sigh. Sora found herself watching Elend when she thought no one noticed. The way their hands moved, careful but not timid. The way they listened, head slightly tilted, as though every sound carried more than one meaning. There was a stillness to them that reminded her of standing water beneath ice. "You can help me," Lara said, breaking the quiet, "if you like." Elend looked up at once. "Yes," they said a little too quickly. Then they smiled sheepish. "Please." Lara handed them a small bundle of dried herbs and a length of red thread. "These need tying," she said. "Not too tight, they should breathe." Elend nodded, setting to the task with surprising ease. Sora joined them at the table, working on her own bundle. Their fingers moved in companionable rhythm, thread winding, knots settling into place. "This was my grandmother's table," Sora said suddenly, not sure why the words had surfaced. Elend glanced up. "It feels like it remembers things," they said. Sora smiled. "It does." The air felt thick with that same subtle hum, not loud, not urgent, but present. Lara noticed it too. She always did. It thrummed through her bones, familiar as her own pulse, yet newly alert. After a while, Lara stepped outside to tend the offerings at the threshold, leaving Sora and Elend alone with the fire and the quiet work of hands. "I hope I haven't disrupted anything," Elend said softly. Sora shook her head. "No," she said. "I think you arrived because something was already moving." Elend considered that. "That's what it feels like," they admitted. "Like I stepped into a story that was already being told." Sora tied off her thread and set the bundle aside. Most good ones are. Silence followed, not awkward but full. The fire whispered. The candle on the altar flickered, steady and watchful. "May I ask you something?" Elend said. Sora nodded. "Do you ever feel," Elend began slowly, "as though the land is waiting for you to answer a question you haven't learned how to ask yet?" Sora's breath caught. She thought of the hollow, of warmth blooming in her palms, of the carved figure resting now on the altar, quiet but awake. "Yes," she said, "I think I just started listening." Elend's shoulders eased, relief softening their expression. "Then maybe I'm closer than I thought." When Lara returned, snow clinging to the hem of her skirt, she took in the scene with a single glance. The tied bundles, the shared quiet, the way the energy in the room had settled into a new pattern. "Good," she said simply. They shared a midday meal of soup and bread, steam rising as bowls were set out. Lara spoke little, but when she did, her words landed with care, shaping the space rather than filling it. Ellen listened with open attention, asking questions that felt less like curiosity and more like recognition. Afterward, as the light shifted and the sun began its slow descent, Lara fetched her cloak. "Sora," she said, "walk with me." Sora rose at once, heart quickening. She pulled on her boots, glancing at Ellen. "We won't be long," she said. Ellen smiled. "I'll keep the fire company." Outside, the air had softened. The cold no longer bit. It merely lingered, watchful. They walked toward the orchard, their footsteps crunching lightly over snow that had begun to give way beneath the sun. "You felt it this morning," Lara said as they walked. "It was not a question." Sora nodded, stronger than before. Lara stopped beside the oldest apple tree, its trunk gnarled and scarred, its branches bare but unbowed. She placed a hand against the bark, closing her eyes briefly. "The land answered you," she said. "That doesn't happen often, not like that." Sora swallowed. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Lara said at once. Then she smiled, slow and proud. "You did something honest." They stood there together, mother and daughter framed by winter and promise, the tree listening as it always had. Back at the cottage, Ellen fed the fire another log and watched the flames climb. The carved figure on the altar seemed to catch the light differently now, its simple lines alive with quiet intention. Outside, unseen but attentive, the year continued to turn. And none of them, not Lara, not Sora, not Ellen, yet knew how far the door had opened. The apple tree creaked softly as the wind passed through its bare branches, a sound like old bones settling. Sora rested her palm against the trunk beside her mother, the bark rough and cold, grounding. "Come," Lara said at last. "There's something I haven't shown you yet." Sora blinked, surprised. "Here." Lara nodded. "It doesn't wake for just anyone, and not every year." They moved around the tree to the far side, where the land dipped slightly and snow gathered deeper in shadow. Lara knelt and brushed the snow away with her gloved hands, revealing a flat stone set into the earth. Its surface was etched with faint markings, nearly invisible unless the light struck just so. Sora's breath caught. "I've never seen this." "You weren't meant to," Lara said gently. "Not until now." She pressed her palm to the stone. After a moment's hesitation, Sora did the same. The hum returned, stronger, clearer. It rose up through the soles of Sora's boots, through her spine, blooming behind her eyes. The markings on the stone warmed, faint lines glowing as though traced by moonlight rather than sun. "This is a listening place," Lara said quietly. "Older than the cottage, older than our names. It doesn't answer questions, it remembers them." Sora swallowed. "Why show me now?" Lara turned to her, eyes bright and steady. "Because you're being noticed," she said. "By the land, by the old currents, and because someone else has felt the pull too." Sora thought of Ellen, of their careful hands and searching gaze. "You think they're connected to this?" "I think," Lara said, choosing her words with care, "that people don't arrive on Imbolc by accident, especially not carrying unasked questions." They stood in silence, the stone between them thrumming softly. Sora felt no fear, only a widening, as if the world had grown larger without becoming less safe. Back at the cottage, Ellen sat close to the hearth, the warmth seeping into their bones. They had removed their boots and were mending a tear in their glove with a needle borrowed from a basket by the door. Their movements were practiced, almost meditative. Every so often, their gaze drifted to the altar. The carved figure seemed different now, not brighter, not moving but present in a way that tugged at Ellen's chest. They rubbed their sternum absently, frowning. "I know," they murmured, unsure to whom they spoke. "I feel it too." The candle flame leaned just slightly. When Lara and Sora returned, dusk was already beginning to gather at the edges of the sky, blue and deepening. They stamped snow from their boots and shook off the cold, bringing with them the scent of earth and apple wood. "You were quiet," Elen said, looking between them. Lara smiled faintly. So was the land. They set about preparing the evening meal together, falling into an easy rhythm. Elen chopped vegetables while Sora stirred the pot, Lara adding herbs with a knowing hand. The cottage filled with rich, comforting scents, onion and thyme, root vegetables sweetened by slow heat. As they ate, conversation drifted from small things to larger ones. Elen spoke of the road they had walked, of villages half asleep under winter's grip, of nights spent under hedges and stars. Sora listened, rapt, imagining paths winding far beyond the hills she knew. "Do you miss it?" Sora asked. "The traveling?" Elen considered. "Sometimes," they said, "but I think I miss the searching more than the movement." Sora nodded. "I understand that." After the dishes were cleared, Lara lit fresh candles, their flames casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the first stars began to prick the darkening sky. "Tonight," Lara said, "we dream again. Imbolc doesn't finish its work in a single turning." Elen hesitated. "Am I allowed?" Lara met their gaze, something ancient and kind passing between them. "If you're willing to listen," she said, "the night will decide the rest." They settled near the hearth once more, quilts and cushions drawn close. The fire crackled low, steady and warm. Sora lay back, watching the ceiling beams fade into shadow, her thoughts drifting like smoke. She felt the land again, patient, attentive. She felt her mother's presence, solid and sure. She felt Elen nearby, a quiet gravity pulling at the edges of her awareness. Somewhere beneath the cottage, beneath the snow and stone, the year shifted its weight. And in the space between one breath and the next, the dreaming began to gather. The fire sank lower, its voice dropping to a murmur, as if it too were preparing to sleep. Lara waited until she felt the room settle, until the sharp edges of the day had softened, until even the shadows seemed willing to rest. Only then did she speak, her voice quiet enough that it did not disturb the fragile hush. "Dreaming on Imbolc is not like other nights," she said. "It isn't about escape. It's about remembering how to return." Elen shifted slightly, drawing their quilt closer. "Return to what?" Lara smiled, eyes reflecting the firelight. "That's different for everyone." Sora lay very still, hands folded over her chest, feeling the slow, deep rhythm of the cottage. She could sense the dreaming already, waiting just beyond the edge of wakefulness, like a tide pausing before it comes in. "Listen with your whole body," Lara continued. "If you feel lost, follow the warmth. If you feel afraid, stay where you are. Nothing will force you tonight." The reassurance wrapped around Sora like another blanket. Lara closed her eyes first, her breathing evening out with practiced ease. She had walked this threshold many times. For her, the door was familiar, though never identical. Each year asked something new. Sora felt sleep approach again, but differently than before, more deliberate, more aware. She let it come, trusting the quiet hum beneath her ribs to guide her. This time the dream opened with sound. Water dripping steadily, echoing in a wide, unseen space. The air was cool and damp, smelling of stone and moss. Sora found herself standing barefoot on smooth rock, the ground solid and reassuring beneath her feet. She was not alone. A little distance away, Elen stood as well, eyes wide but calm, taking in the cavernous space around them. Pale light filtered from somewhere above, illuminating walls veined with quartz that caught and scattered the glow. "You too?" Elen asked softly. Sora nodded. It seemed so. They did not question how they knew this was a dream, or why they shared it. The place itself made such questions feel unnecessary. Ahead of them, the cavern opened into something larger, a vast chamber where a pool of water lay perfectly still, its surface mirror-smooth. The dripping sound came from here, each drop sending gentle ripples across the pool. Sora felt drawn forward. Each step felt purposeful, as though the ground recognized her. Elen walked beside her, keeping pace. "This feels like a beginning," they said. "Yes," Sora agreed, "and like an ending that hasn't happened yet." They reached the edge of the pool and looked down. Instead of reflections, the water showed scenes, fragmented, shifting images like memories half remembered. Sora saw the orchard in spring, blossoms thick as clouds. She saw the cottage long before it was hers, smoke rising from its chimney under unfamiliar stars. She saw herself, younger, kneeling in the dirt with muddy hands and fierce concentration. Elen inhaled sharply. "I see places I've never been," they whispered, "and ones I've been trying to forget." Sora turned to them. "Does it hurt?" Elen considered. "Not like I expected," they said. "It feels honest." The water stirred, ripples overlapping until the images blurred. Slowly, something else emerged from beneath the surface. A light not bright, not blinding, but steady. It rose like a breath held too long and finally released, gathering shape as it did. A figure took form, indistinct at first, then clearer. A woman-shaped presence made of glow and shadow, her edges soft, her core bright. Sora felt no fear, only recognition. "You stand at the listening," the figure said, her voice layered as though many voices spoke together. "One born to it, one drawn to it." Elen bowed their head instinctively. Sora did not. She met the figure's gaze, heart pounding, warmth spreading through her chest. "What are we meant to do?" Sora asked. The figure smiled, not with lips but with light. "That is not mine to say," she replied, "only to ask." The cavern seemed to lean closer, stone and water and air attending. "What will you tend?" the figure asked gently, "when the year asks for your hands?" Sora opened her mouth to answer, and felt herself drifting, the dream loosening its hold as the fire crackled softly back in the waking world. In the cottage, Lara stirred, brow furrowing slightly, sensing the shift. She did not wake, not yet. Elen's breathing hitched once, then steadied. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly on, indifferent and intimate all at once. And the question, asked but not yet answered, followed them all the way to the edge of waking. Waking came gently this time, like a hand laid on the shoulder rather than a jolt. Sora surfaced slowly, aware first of warmth, then of sound. The low whisper of embers, the soft sigh of someone breathing nearby, the faint creak of the cottage settling into the deep hours before dawn. Her eyes fluttered open to dimness. The candle on the altar burned down to a short, steady flame. For a moment the cavern lingered behind her eyes, the cool stone, the still water, the question echoing with patient insistence. She pressed her hand to her chest, half expecting to feel that inner glow again. Instead, she felt something quieter, more grounded, like a seed tucked carefully into soil. Across from her, Elen lay awake. They were staring up at the ceiling beams, eyes reflective rather than restless. When they noticed Sora watching, they turned their heads slightly. "You saw it too," Elen said softly. Sora nodded. "The pool." "And the question," Elen added. "Yes." Silence stretched between them, not empty, but weighted with shared knowing. Sora had never experienced anything quite like it. this sense of standing alongside someone in the unseen and returning with the same echo ringing in both their chests. "I don't think," Elen said slowly, "that it was asking for an answer tonight." Sora considered this. The pressure she'd felt in the dream had been real but not urgent, expectant perhaps, patient. "No," she agreed. "It felt like being recognized." Elen smiled faintly. "That's the word." From her bed near the hearth, Lara shifted. She did not wake fully, but Sora could tell she had sensed something. Lara always did. Her breathing deepened again, steady as a tide returning to shore. Sora lay back, letting the dark cradle her thoughts. She thought of the stone beneath the apple tree, of the way it had warmed under her palm. She thought of the carved figure on the altar, its quiet presence threading through the cottage like a held note. She thought of Elen's arrival, how natural it felt now, as though the cottage had simply revealed a space that had always been waiting. Eventually, sleep found her again. When morning came, it came bright. Sunlight streamed through the shutters, unapologetic and pale gold, catching on the edges of jars and baskets and turning the dust motes into drifting sparks. The fire had burned itself low but left behind a bed of warmth that still breathed faintly. Lara was already awake. She stood at the table, grinding something fragrant with a mortar and pestle, her movements unhurried. She looked up as Sora stirred. "Good morning, Hearth Light," she said. Sora smiled, stretching. "Morning." Elen sat up more cautiously, rubbing sleep from their eyes. For a heartbeat, uncertainty flickered across their face, as if they were not sure whether the night had been real or imagined. Then they caught sight of the altar. The carved figure seemed unchanged. Something in Elen's posture eased. Lara set the mortar aside and poured water into the kettle. "You both dreamed," she said, not accusing, not asking. Sora swung her legs over the side of her bed. "Yes." "Together," Elen added, a little wonder still coloring their voice. Lara studied them both, her gaze sharp and kind all at once. "Imbolc does that sometimes," she said, "when paths are meant to cross more than once." She handed Sora a mug of warm water with honey and lemon. "Drink," she said. "Dreams take more than they give at first." Sora obeyed, the warmth settling pleasantly in her belly. "Mother," she said after a moment, "what happens after someone is noticed?" Lara's lips curved into a small smile. "Usually," she said, "life continues, chores need doing, meals need cooking, and somewhere in the middle of all that something new learns how to fit." Elen laughed softly at that, tension dissolving further. "I can help with chores," they offered quickly. "To thank you, truly." Lara raised an eyebrow. "You don't need thanks to be useful here," she said. Then, after a beat, "But I won't turn down help." Soon the cottage was alive with motion. Sora swept the floor while Elen fetched water from the well, marveling at the way the bucket's rope sang faintly against the stone. Lara set dough to rise near the hearth, humming under her breath, a tune Sora had heard all her life but never quite learned. Outside, the snow had begun to recede in earnest. Thin streams of meltwater traced paths through the yard, catching sunlight and flashing bright. A single snowdrop near the wall had opened fully, its white head lifted toward the day. Sora paused in her sweeping to watch it. Elen followed her gaze. "It's early," they said. "Yes," Sora replied, "but not wrong." Lara glanced out the window and nodded. "That's Imbolc," she said. "Not a promise of spring, just permission." The words settled into Sora's bones, comfortable and steady. As the morning wore on, there came another knock at the door, lighter this time, familiar. Lara smiled before she even opened it. "Come in," she called. "I know those knuckles." The door swung open to reveal a neighbor wrapped in a thick shawl, cheeks pink from the cold, a basket hooked over one arm. "I thought I smelled bread," the woman said cheerfully, "and I figured today was the day." Sora and Elen exchanged a glance. The day, it seemed, was still unfolding, threads weaving together quietly, deliberately. And whatever answer the year was waiting for had not yet made itself known. The neighbor stamped the snow from her boots and stepped inside, bringing with her a gust of cold air and the scent of sheep's wool and wood smoke. "Morning, Lara," she said warmly. "Morning, Sora." Her eyes flicked to Elen, curious but unguarded. "And well, good morning to you too." "Good morning," Elen replied, standing a little straighter. There was a flicker of uncertainty there, but also something like relief. Being seen, Sora realized, was becoming a theme. "I brought eggs," the woman said, lifting her basket. "Fresh. Well, fresher than anything winter usually allows." She smiled, conspiratorial. "And a bit of butter. The ewes are feeling generous this week." "Then we're blessed indeed," Lara said, taking the basket and setting it on the table. "Stay, eat with us." The woman didn't pretend to resist. She shed her shawl and hung it by the door, already settling into the rhythm of the cottage as if she'd always belonged to it, which, in many ways, she had. As they talked, Sora noticed how Elen listened. Not just to the words, but to the pauses between them, the way voices rose and fell. They asked no intrusive questions, yet somehow learned much simply by being present. It was a skill Sora recognized, one her mother valued deeply. The dough rose. Eggs were cracked into a bowl, their yolks rich and golden. The cottage filled with the sound of conversation and small laughter, the kind that comes easily when no one is trying too hard. At one point, the neighbor leaned closer to Lara and lowered her voice. "Felt it, didn't you?" she murmured. "Last night." Lara nodded once. "Yes." The woman's gaze drifted briefly to Sora, then away again, respectful. "Thought so," she said. "The hill been humming since before dawn." Sora pretended not to hear, but the words settled into her awareness like a pebble dropped into water. When the neighbor finally left, basket lighter, spirits high, the cottage seemed to hold onto the warmth she left behind. The fire crackled, the bread baked, and the day leaned toward afternoon. Elen helped Lara carry wood inside, their conversation low and easy. Sora watched from the window, noticing how naturally Elen adjusted their stride to match Lara's, how they listened with their whole body. There was no rush in them now, no restless edge. Later, as Lara stepped away to tend to something in the back room, Elen joined Sora by the hearth. "I don't know how to explain this," Elen said quietly, "but I feel steadier here." Sora nodded. "The cottage does that." Elen smiled. "I thought it might be you." Heat crept up Sora's cheeks, though whether from the fire or the words she couldn't tell. "Maybe it's both," she said. Outside, clouds began to gather, not heavy with storm, but thick enough to soften the light. The world felt hushed again, as if preparing for another kind of listening. Lara returned, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She set it on the table but did not open it. "This afternoon," she said, "we'll walk to the stream." Sora's heart lifted. "Today?" "Yes," Lara replied. "Imbolc isn't finished with us yet." Elen hesitated, then asked carefully, "May I come?" Lara met their gaze, weighing something unseen. At last she nodded. "If you're willing to walk without knowing why." Elen smiled, a genuine, quiet smile. "I think that's how I walk best." The bread came out of the oven, crust crackling softly as it cooled. Sora tore off a small piece, steam curling upward, and ate it standing by the table, feeling the simple rightness of the moment settle into her bones. Beyond the walls, the land waited, not impatiently, not urgently, but with the calm assurance of something that knew it would be answered in time. And whatever lay ahead, by the stream, beneath the apple tree, or somewhere further still, had not yet revealed its shape. By the time the sun dipped lower, painting the snow in shades of amber and soft violet, Lara was ready. She beckoned Sora and Elen to gather at the door, wrapping themselves in cloaks, scarves, and gloves. The cold bit at their cheeks, sharp but not cruel, as they stepped out into the soft hush of the late afternoon. The orchard was quiet, except for the faint groan of the wind through bare branches and the occasional rustle of a bird startled into flight. The air carried the scent of snow melting into earth, a clean, deep fragrance that made Sora take a long, steady breath. "The stream isn't far," Lara said, her voice calm, carrying a note of expectation. "It will show you things you cannot see here." Sora glanced at Elen, whose eyes had brightened with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Together, they followed Lara down the winding path toward the low dip where the water had pooled over winter months. Snow crunched softly under their boots, and at times Sora had to step carefully over ice-hidden roots, the thrill of alertness sharpening her senses. As they approached, the sound of water grew, a steady trickle under sheets of ice, breaking through in small, liquid bursts. The stream wound lazily between snow-laden banks, reflective and silvered, a mirror holding fragments of the late afternoon sky. Sora knelt at its edge, peering into the clear water, and for the first time that day felt the pull of quiet reverence that had haunted her since the stone under the apple tree. "This is where the year remembers," Lara said, kneeling beside her. Not in grand gestures, not in noise, but in whispers and ripples. Elen crouched on the opposite side, leaning forward, hands resting on cold stones. "I think I feel it," they whispered, like it's waiting for someone to notice the right question. Sora dipped her hand into the water. It was colder than she expected, sharp and alive, and for a heartbeat she could see not just her reflection but a faint shimmer, as if the surface itself were holding a hidden current. "What do we ask?" she murmured, unsure whether the question belonged to her or to the stream itself. Lara smiled gently. "We wait. The stream listens best to what is unspoken first." They knelt in silence, allowing the wind and water to speak for them. The faint hum Sora had felt all week seemed to thicken here, more insistent, like the heartbeat of the world hidden beneath snow and ice. She felt it through the soles of her boots, through her spine, in her chest. The water rippled lightly against her fingers as if acknowledging her presence. Elen leaned closer. "Do you think it remembers us?" Sora nodded slowly. "I think it does. It remembers everything that comes here, everything that touches it." Lara reached across the stream, lightly touching Sora's hand, then Elen's. "And that is why you are here, because the land remembers and we are part of its memory." For a long moment none of them spoke. The sky deepened, soft violet shading into navy. The air smelled faintly of wet stone, pine, and winter's lingering cold. Ripples danced across the surface of the water, small and steady, each one a pulse, a quiet heartbeat. "Sometimes," Lara said finally, her voice low, "the year asks for more than we expect. Sometimes it wants us to carry its memory forward, to hold it so it can grow." Sora felt a tremor of understanding. She could feel it now, the weight of the unseen, of history pressing gently but insistently against her own hands. And with that, the stream seemed to shimmer, the water catching the last light, reflecting not just sky and snow, but something deeper: movement, life, promise. Elen exhaled, a sound of wonder. I think it knows us already." Sora nodded, her fingers still touching the water. She felt that pulse again, the same deep, patient hum she had felt in the orchard, at the altar beneath the apple tree. And she understood, suddenly, that it was not just memory. They were being seen, acknowledged by something far older than their years, far larger than the cottage or the orchard or even the hills themselves. The wind stirred behind them, teasing loose strands of hair, brushing snow against their cheeks. The water whispered, tiny eddies circling their fingers, urging, encouraging, patient. Lara's voice cut through the quiet. "There is a ritual to be done," she said softly, "but it begins with presence. And you," she added, looking at Sora and Elen, "must be willing to listen without expecting a guide." Sora's pulse quickened. "I am ready," she said, almost breathless. Elen nodded beside her. "So am I." Lara smiled, her eyes glinting with light that was part mischief, part reverence. She rose gracefully, beckoning them to follow. The three of them stepped closer to the stream, their reflections fractured by the gentle ripples, but each fragment glowing as if infused with the same quiet magic that lingered in the orchard, the stone, the cottage, and the carved figure. The stream seemed to hold its breath. And in that pause, Sora understood that the work of Imbolc, the listening, the remembering, the answering of unspoken questions, was only just beginning. The stream was silent for a moment, yet the silence felt alive, as if the water itself were holding its breath, waiting for something beyond sight or sound. Lara, Sora, and Elen knelt at its edge, letting the cold lap at their fingers and ankles, each of them attuned to the pulse beneath the surface. The hum that had threaded through the cottage, the orchard, the apple tree, and now the stream itself. Lara spoke first, her voice low, almost a whisper so that only those present could hear. "The land has been listening. It has felt your presence. And now it offers itself, not as guidance, not as a solution, but as an opportunity. What you take from it, what you leave behind, is your own." Sora glanced at Elen. Their eyes met and held, a quiet understanding passing between them. The stream, the orchard, the cottage, the snow, the candlelight, all of it was alive with attention, aware of them, waiting. This was not merely ritual, this was communion, the kind that did not demand proof, only presence. Elen dipped a hand into the water, tracing patterns on its surface. The ripples spread outward, catching the light and throwing shards of silver across the snow along the banks. "It's beautiful," they murmured, "and yet it feels like it's asking for something." "You're correct," Lara said. "It does. It asks for acknowledgement, for care, for memory, and for courage. Not the kind of courage that seeks victory, but the courage to remain gentle, to remain present, and to carry what is given responsibly." Sora's hands pressed to her chest, feeling the pulse there echoing the rhythm of the stream, the orchard, the cottage. She realized she understood now. All the Imbolc rituals she had witnessed, all the baking and lighting of candles, the weaving of herbs, the kneeling at the stone, they were training. Not for magic in the flashy sense, but for listening, for presence, for learning to hold the weight of the world's quiet movements without fear. The sky above them had deepened into twilight, stars beginning to prick at the indigo, as if the universe itself leaned closer to hear. Lara reached into the bundle she had carried from the cottage and drew out the carved figure, small, pale wood, but luminous somehow, as if the very act of being observed had infused it with a glow. "This belongs here," Lara said, lifting it so that Sora and Elen could see. "Not just in the cottage, not just on the altar, but here, where water and earth meet, where winter begins to loosen, where the year listens for those willing to speak without expectation." Sora felt a tremor of reverence as she took the figure from her mother's hands. The wood was warm now, pulsing faintly beneath her fingers, and as she set it carefully on a flat stone at the edge of the stream, she could swear it hummed softly, in tune with the water, with her heartbeat, with the world itself. The three of them sat on the snowy bank, knees tucked close, and watched as the stream embraced the figure with tiny ripples. Lara's hands rested lightly on Sora's shoulder and Elend's back, her touch anchoring them, steadying them. "The year is turning," Lara said, "and we are witnesses. We are caretakers. This is the gift of Imbolc, to notice, to tend, to remember, and to act gently when the time comes." Sora leaned forward, touching the surface of the water. In its reflection, she could see the faint shimmer of the three of them, faces soft with wonder, eyes wide with recognition. And behind them, stretching back through the orchard, the cottage, the apple tree, even the stone at the foot of the hill, the pulse she had felt for so long, patient and unwavering, threaded through every layer of her life. Elend, too, dipped a hand into the stream. Their fingers brushed against Sora, and they shared a small, quiet smile. "I think I understand now," Elend said. "I understand why I came here and why I'm still here. It's not about finding the answer. It's about becoming part of the memory, part of the rhythm." "Yes," Sora said softly. "We are all part of it, the land, the year, the stream, and each other." Lara drew a deep breath. "It's almost time to return," she said, though her eyes lingered on the stream, the carved figure, the snow-dusted orchard. "But remember this, the work of Imbolc does not end at sunset. It flows through every day that follows. Every act of care, every listening moment, every recognition of the unseen threads. That is where the magic truly lives." Sora's heart felt impossibly full, as if it were expanding to hold the rhythm of the world. She glanced at Elend, at the figure, at her mother, and then back at the stream. "I'll remember," she said. "I'll carry it with me." "And so will I," Elend said, a quiet certainty in their voice. The three of them rose together, the night fully upon them now, soft and deep and infinite. The stars reflected in the water, the ripples catching and scattering them like tiny beacons. Lara took Sora's hand and Elend's, and they began the slow walk back up the hill toward the cottage, the snow crunching beneath their boots, the wind whispering secrets through the bare branches. They did not speak much, for none of them needed words. The world was alive and their hearts were aligned with it. And as they reached the orchard and then the apple tree and finally the cottage, they carried with them the hum, the memory of the stream, the pulse of the land, the warmth of Imbolc that would not fade. Inside, the cottage welcomed them, fire still warm in the hearth, candlelight soft and unwavering on the altar. Lara set the carved figure in its place, and Sora and Elend knelt beside her, breathing in the familiar scents: wood smoke, bread, herbs, and the faint undercurrent of something older, more patient. "The year will remember this night," Lara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And so will you." Sora closed her eyes and felt the hum settle deep within her, steady, enduring, like a heartbeat that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. Elend did the same, hands resting lightly on their knees, a quiet reverence in the simple act of being present. Outside, the first snow of the night began to fall, soft and light, swirling gently against the windows, dusting the orchard, the stream, the path back to the hill. It was a snow that would not bite, only blanket, only hold, only remind the world of the quiet, patient turning of the seasons. And in that moment, Sora realized that Imbolc was not about a single night or a single ritual. It was about the thread that ran through everything, the memory of the land, the pulse of life, the quiet magic of noticing and tending, and the love passed from mother to daughter, from one traveler to another, from one heartbeat to another. She opened her eyes and saw Lara smiling at her, then Elend smiling at her, and she understood fully that they had all become part of something larger than themselves. The pulse beneath the earth, the wind in the orchard, the water in the stream, they were all alive with attention, and now so were they. The night deepened, and still they stayed by the hearth, wrapped in quilts, listening to the soft crackle of embers, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of the world settle over them. Outside, the snow whispered against the cottage walls, stars gleamed faintly beyond the frost-lined windows, and the hum that had begun long before their births flowed through the land, through their hearts, through their hands. And for the first time, Sora understood fully what it meant to belong, to witness, to tend, and to listen. To carry the memory of the night, the stream, the orchard, and the apple tree into all the days yet to come. In the soft glow of the candlelight, mother and daughter and traveler were at once small and vast, present and eternal, cradled in the quiet magic of Imbolc that would live on long after the fire had burned down and the snow had melted from the hills. The hum continued, patient and sure, threading through every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of gentle, enduring wonder. And so, in the warmth of the cottage, with love surrounding them and the world leaning close, they slept, dreaming not just of what had been, but of everything that could yet be, carrying the pulse of the land into the turning of the year. And in that quiet, infinite moment, the story, like the year itself, continued unbroken, a ribbon of light and memory, hope and magic, flowing endlessly into the hearts of those willing to notice.